And the relationship before we were married was, I've always described it, was like 90% on point. But the 10% was very significant. It wasn't like the 10% of, oh, we have like these issues that we need to work out. The 10% was the reason why we ended up splitting. And there were red flags. I mean, I know that's an incredibly overused term, but there was some red flags that were very, very major upon, reflection. The nature of those flags really pointed more to my not being able to ask for what I need inside of a relationship because of my pathological fear of the relationship not working out. So we got married, and it was pretty much tumultuous for the 2 years that we were married. It was very, very painful. It was a classic example of, I've healed so much of this, but I've historically had a very troubling relationship with my father, who, with his own mental health issues, would shut down and pull away. And I never knew what kind of mood he would be in. So I was the daughter that was more sensitive. So I grew up with a level of hypervigilance around men and their moods, because this wouldn't really happen in friendships. Turns out I marry someone who is, on the surface and personality-wise, couldn't be any more different from my father, but he had undiagnosed bipolar stuff, and he had serious avoidant and shutdown issues. And that would trigger me to the core. And so we were playing that out. And as anyone who is pathologically afraid of being abandoned, of the relationship ending, there would be times where I would get angry. It's not like I was just like this useless doormat all the time, but I wouldn't actually ever express on a deep level, this needs to change or else I'm out, ultimatum style.
Yeah.
And so it was just a mess. And when that ended, and I've healed really all of this. This is not a trauma that lives inside of me at all anymore. But it ended really lame. It was over the phone. And my mother, before it ended, was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, and you don't survive that. So I had my mother dying. I was having a miscarriage, and then he was like, peace, I'm out. So that day that all happened, I was like, this is what it's like for your life to fall apart. It was surreal.
Yeah.
I was like, this is my life falling apart. I do not mean to romanticize growth or change, because it's just not something that should be romanticized. It's usually very dirty and messy and ugly. But that really was the day. It was like the day I died. There was the death of Jillian as I knew her, and then a sort of rebirth. And I couldn't believe it, because I also had all this conditioning weighing on my shoulders, because I was 40. And now I wasn't going to have the opportunity to have a child, and my husband was leaving me. Who would ever want me? Which is like, for anyone listening, that's like turned out to be like the funniest thing ever, because nothing could be further from the truth. But I felt that, and I could not fucking believe that this was happening. I could not believe. I was like, why can't I get this relationship thing right? And for me, right meant lasting, because I've had some really lovely, beautiful relationships. So I became obsessed, and I've always been sort of obsessed about what makes a relationship work. But now I got really obsessed. And I guess in trying to cope with the grief of losing my marriage, my mom dying, and then eventually she did die, I just put all my energy into this new form of coaching. I think that's really what motivated me, is that I had to put my energy into something so that I could stay afloat, so that I could actually get my ass out of bed in the morning. I never would kill myself. I would never consider myself suicidal, but I think there are moments where many of us will say to ourselves, I wish I would die, So I guess it's suicidal ideation. I mean, I literally was like, I don't know how I'm going to make it. Even though I knew that deep down, I knew I would, I just didn't know how. And so I put all my energy into figuring this out. I've always been very lucky teachers have always come into my life at the right time. Like, for yoga, I've had a lot of mentors and teachers and people who I've learned from. And I had my friend who lived in the building, because I'm from New York City. I was living in Brooklyn, and it was June. So I was outside with my dog, and it was beautiful. I was able to just like be outside. Otherwise, I'd probably never leave my apartment, never leave my bed. And she found me, and she happened to be a coach. And this is years ago. So I was very much in the wellness yoga world, the coaching, personal development world. I was not it's crazy because I feel so part of it now, which is both fun and embarrassing all at once. But I was not familiar with that. But she was a coach, and she was like one of like the first that I have known of. And she sat down and she's like, "You're really going through it, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." And I told her everything that was happening. And what makes her brilliant as a coach is that she's such a good listener. And she's like, "You should really listen to some Tony Robbins videos." I was like, "The infomercial dude?" Like I was so just not in that world. And I'm sort of skeptic by nature. And I was like, "I'm going to hate him." And she's like, I don't think you are. I think it's going to resonate. And she sent me some stuff that back then you couldn't find on YouTube. And it's because she'd went to some sort of seminar. So she had access to something. And then she's like, "Just watch it." And I said, "Okay, well, I have nothing to lose." And she sent me these 3-hour-long videos. And I watched them all that night. And something clicked for me. And the rest is history.